Hello and welcome back to my game dev series. Quickly first in this video I'd like to run through a minor change that I made between videos. So if I run my game, you will see that there's a little bit of change in the graphics. Now I am using some tree objects that I designed for a previous game. So I thought, well, I have them, so why don't I just leverage those? And then as well as the out-of-bounds trees up there, I guess they all have a little bit more depth to them, which is somewhat appealing. The stumps are a bit different. Now the thing about that is my main player and the skeleton and some other things, they're more, I guess, pixely, blocky looking, so they don't exactly fit the look of the trees and whatnot. But for right now, just as development art, I think that's alright. What I was able to do was just scale up a lot of the textures in Photoshop, and then there's a setting that I could use to retain kind of the blockiness of the textures. And yeah, I think for the most part, what else did I do with that? Yeah, I changed those also because I wanted to remove the scaling of the rendering. So I used to have 16 by 16 pixel graphics, and I changed those to 32 by 32. And I used to be scaling all the graphics by a factor of 2. So essentially it was taking the 16 by 16s and making them 32 by 32 blocks on the screen. Now, it's probably a bit better just to display them in the native size that you have them. So I went ahead and just scaled those in Photoshop, and well, that's really it for that, I guess. I don't know what else to say there. So in this video, I guess my idea was that I have this concept of objects in game, and a good example of that would be the trees. Now, I do have a tree.h header, and in there I'm basically deriving the frame, or what sprite should be displayed on screen based on the health of a tree. And unfortunately, or not, depending on how you look at it, I used to have kind of a secondary or intermediary state here with the trees where if you would chop it, it would look a little scraggly. I don't have that anymore, so if I chop this enough times, it just goes down to the stump look. Then you chop it a few more times and it goes away and you collect the wood. But that beginning state up until becoming a stump, that's all based on health. So I can somewhat animate how I want the trees to look based on that. And that's about the only real special capabilities there. So if I look in my map file, if you're looking in the interact front function, this just determines whether or not you can interact with a thing in front of you. And as you see here, I'm getting an iterator for a tree, and are checking to see if a tree actually exists in the location that is in front of the player. And if it does exist, then obviously you can interact with it. So we're lowering the health of the tree when you chop it, increasing player score, and then again we're changing the tree's sprite based on its health, if we need to anyway. And then if health goes below 0, then we want to erase that tree from the vector. What is it? Vector, isn't it? Unordered map. course, why would it be a vector? Change the collision so we can walk on that spot. And then the map, what is that doing? That's changing the texture in the map. So the thing I don't like about how I have this set up right now is if I load up one of my map files up here, I think graveyard is, nope, that one is in a single line. Battle, okay. If you look at layer 1 here, -1 means we're not displaying a texture there. So -1 all the way to the end, and then you have 1. And 1 correlates to that beginning tree graphic. So if I load that up here, which is textures, that correlates to this first block. And so the second one would be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you know. Or actually, no, that's incorrect. This would be 0, of course, because indexing because it's 0. This is 1, and like I said, I don't have that intermediate state, so it just looks the same as position 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now the difficulty with that is I'm using special logic there, but these are just textures on the layer. So I don't really like having that kind of logic because it's a little bit, I guess it gets difficult to really manage that in the long haul, because when you load up this JSON file, you basically have to parse layer 1 and determine, you know, anywhere that you see a 0, a 1, or a 2, you have to say, okay, in that position we have a tree object. Whereas a different approach that we could have would be, you know, have a top level array that is trees, and then within there you can have like a key value type. Well, actually it wouldn't be an array, would it? It'd have to be something like that if I'm doing keys. And then what I do in other places within the data, if I'm like emplacing something into a map or an unordered map, I do an XY pair as the key. So you do like say 10, 4, you know, so that'd be 10 over 4 down from the top, and then, you know, you do whatever your object is. So if you want something below that, it would be 10, 5, and then whatever your object is. So I think in this case our inner object would just say, let's just do texture position, and that equates to, in this case, 1. So on and so forth. It could be 0, it could be 1, it could be 2, you know. What I could even do is, instead of having those be in the same file as textures, like if I just want, you know, no, they could be in the same file. I thought if you split those out into its own file, maybe that would be sensible, just to keep a little bit of separation between objects, but I don't know if that's inherently necessary at this point. Because these are essentially all they're all objects, so they're collision objects. You can't walk on top of them. But I could potentially just rename this to objects.png and maybe go that route. And then if I have like grass and dirt and like cobblestone textures or something like that, I could put those in their own file and maybe just call that textures or something. I'll have to work that out in the future. I don't know exactly how I want to handle that right now. But we'll probably end up with something like this. And of course we can have other parameters as well. If we want to say like, okay, this tree starts out with this amount of health or whatever the case may be. I don't really know why you'd want it to be less than 100% right away. I mean, there's no visual quality showing you that it's less than 100% unless it's a stump. So maybe we'll just not get into that kind of craziness right now. But if we wanted to translate this more into this format, what we could do is, let's see, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Is that correct? Yeah, so these are actually 11, and I must have 11 across, 11 down. So position at, yeah, that's right, 10, 0, 10, 1. We want to go all the way down to 10, 2, 10, 3, 10, 4, 10, 5, 10, 6, 10, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then we need to go across on the bottom. So we'd have basically be the inverse, wouldn't it? This would be 0, 10, x, y, x, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I think that'll work. Now, I don't necessarily care how large this JSON file gets because you're not really interacting with it beyond the initial load of the map, right? So in collision, we could either keep the collision like this because we defined all the trees in those locations, or we could update the collision dynamically once you load the map. But I think I'm gonna keep these hard-coded into the collision array like that, because say in my map editor tool, when you emplace a tree object on the map, well, I would have it update the collision array behind the scenes, and then you save the map and it spits out the JSON with that in there. So I'll just keep that. These, however, need to be changed to -1s because we no longer have, or we will not have a special layer 1 texture in those positions. So basically when you're rendering the map, ultimately rendering objects like trees and whatnot, that'll be its own pass. So where it used to be layer 1, now it'll be kind of its own function within that render loop. Actually, what I'm gonna do too of course I didn't put that in the right place. I'm going to copy this into its own file. And kind of undo everything I did in here because I want the battle JSON file to be a specific way for testing purposes. In this we can just kind of screw around with whatever. I do not want this to be a battle zone. We'll try that. Just going to run a PHP script to convert that map into the CBOR type, as I had mentioned before in a previous video. Now, let me go into, let me close some stuff here. Let me go into the engine code and we'll just arbitrarily load up test as the default map here. I think that's, yeah. That's here in the init. So if we build that, it should pop us right into that window. And yeah, since I have removed that texture definition from that row as well as the bottom, but I kept the collision definition, we'll have to go back and make the tree objects show up like they're supposed to. I think the place we need to start with that will be in map. If we check the init objects, I believe, is where that happens. So that's here. What is above there? Move. Init objects, that clears the trees, which makes sense. For loading a new file, you got to wipe out the old ones. Of course, I have a dumb hack. Yeah, and see, this is kind of one of the things that I had been talking about before, but hadn't gotten to yet. So unless I make like an actual object definition or layer on the map, then we're kind of just hacking in the trees. So tree bottom index and tree top index, that equates to those positions within the texture map, right? So 0, 1, 2, 3. State map begin. So we're just looping through the map right here. Rows and columns. We're checking tile position, so that would be the definition in layer 1 to check what the number there is. So if it's 0, 1, 2, or 3, you'd be looking at an actual tree object. And so we're getting the tree's position based on, or the health based on the position in the tile map. And then this is kind of a hack that I remember. So for the out of bounds trees, which are these guys, which is position 3 in the texture map, we're setting the health to an insanely high number that you're probably never going to destroy, right? So that's essentially saying you cannot chop this thing down. If you try, you will die before you even get done with that. So we're setting a float for the tree's position. So obviously as you move the map, that's going to adjust. And then we place that all into the tree's unordered map. And you can see here, I'm using that convention that I talked about where we get like a int x and y value as the key, and that corresponds with this type of notation here. So essentially we want to take out, I guess, all of this nonsense, and instead of reading from layer 1, we just want to read from this new structure here. That being said, something else we need to do before that is we need to be able to read that in from the JSON file. And that'll happen in JSON reader. So init and parse. So direction battle zone, layer 1 is where that used to be happening. Let's just do it below collision. So trees, the tree definition here. How did we define that before? State trees in place. So let's look at state. Trees are masters. So we're going to copy that for right now. And we'll say that trees are map string tree. We'll be able to load into that unordered map. Get I don't know how well this will work, but we'll see what happens. I should have kept that. Master tree. Okay. Oh, well, of course you got to put it in the right place too, you freaking dingbat. Okay. So we'll do state trees equals trees. I'm ready for this to just blow up completely in my face. Yep, there we go. Tree T undeclared. Yeah, probably because I need types on that. It is in a namespace. Standard. Need a little bit more there. 1, 2. Kaboom. JSON.h. No matching overloaded function. I'm assuming the problem here is that it does not know how to cast. Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't know how to turn this into a tree struct. So tree T, what does that look like? That's in types. So it has a position and a health. And the position, I mean, that's the position, but that'd be position within the texture. Never really remember the syntax for, or the key command for replace there. So texture pose. We want to replace that with position. Okay. And then health. Let's just call those 90. Because I think that's what position 1 would have equated to before. So health and position. And yeah, as you can imagine, mocking out this kind of thing is a little bit tedious, but in the long run, it's going to be beneficial. I mean, it still doesn't really know how to convert that, unfortunately. What I can do, though, look at the documentation here real quick. Is there a way to be able to deserialize into a custom type? I guess is what I'm looking for here. 6. Implicit conversions. It's recommended not to do that from a JSON value. Arbitrary type conversions. This is probably closer to what I'm looking for. Every type can be serialized in JSON, not just STL, containers, and scalar types. Usually you would do something along those lines. So they have their struct here. Convert to JSON, copy each value into the JSON object. Okay. Convert from JSON, copy each value from the JSON object. That makes sense. So you get each element essentially. Fortunately, there's a better way. Person. And that's essentially what I'm doing. However, it seems like it doesn't like that. So it's ns to JSON from JSON. So I suppose I need a from JSON function. I'm going to copy that right here. Since it's in types, I don't really want to dump this in here, but I'm going to anyway. At position get t position health to t health. We don't have an age, so take that out. I'm not sure if that will work or not. But there's only one way to find out. Oh, yeah, kaboom. Okay. Missing type specifier int assumed. Undeclared. Health position types, let's see, position health. One thing that might help here, I don't know. No idea if that's necessary. Probably will not make any difference whatsoever. Yeah, that because that's already getting included. I sometimes feel like I'm way too stupid to be doing this. Missing. Like, very stupid. Int assumed. This does not support default int. And it's weird that it gives me just completely off line numbers. It's 50, I mean, it's right there. Does that have to be casted somehow? Those methods must be in your type's namespace, which is the case here. Must be available everywhere you use these conversions. That is the case because I'm including types and it's getting trickled down. Must be default constructible. Don't know what that means. Could be default constructed. For objects of non-aggregate class type, a default, blah, blah, blah. Non-const objects of non-class object type are always, so that means probably a struct, which in this case is non-const, non-class object type, compound types, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I think I'm all right there. And function from JSON, use function at to access the object values rather than operator. Yeah. This key does not exist. Yeah. Let's look at the at function here. Okay. Now, first of all, I can't freaking stand that syntax, so there's that. Not going to make any difference, frankly. But my line numbers did go back to normal at least. Those are supposed to be voids, aren't they? I mean, why is it throwing a fit? Actually, let me do this too. I mean, I don't know if that'll even matter. No, of course not. Well, that's less of an error now. No matching conversion can be found. Types 52. Could not deduce template argument for. Oh, wow. You gotta love C++ errors that just make no damn sense whatsoever. Well, this is just becoming misery at this point. I mean, I'm doing something incredibly stupid, I just don't know what it is. I mean, do I necessarily need the 2JSON, or is that... I mean, I can do that. I don't necessarily know why I would. Types 52. Can't convert from initializer list to JSON. That basically puts me in the same boat. Yeah, I'm sure that'll just explode if I, oops, if I take that off again. Yeah, of course. keep recompiling. It ain't gonna make it any better. Oh, because this uses probably a custom type as well, and I probably, well, damn it. That probably might have something to do with it. And I don't know how you overcome having a type inside of a type. So if I have one from JSON function here, I would need one for that type as well. I don't know if you can define. Serializer works fine. We have control over the type's namespace. I mean, I do in this case. The thing is, they're all within the type's namespace. Oh, but that's dependent on the struct that you're giving it. So, okay, if I do void from JSON point float, that should just have an x and a y. X p.x and y goes into p.y. Now, let me delete that for the moment. The problem there is that position ten is a position that's supposed to be positioned within the map. Sorry. Point float position. Point float health. Okay. Right, because position within the texture is derived from the health. So this is actually going to be x 10 y 0. Of course, I could arguably test this with less objects, but I'm stupid, I suppose. honestly will be a bit amazed if this works, just because that error message was incredibly ambiguous. I don't think I would ever want to use C++ as a first language just for learning. My first language was actually probably, I was going to say JavaScript. I mean, I had a JavaScript book at first, but I didn't really grasp what was going on there. So after that, I think once I got into web coding more, I got into PHP. Wow, that actually, like, oh, wow. Yeah, that's closer anyway. I got into PHP and then kind of branched out from there. But had I begun with C++, I think it would have been highly demotivational, to be honest with you. Let's see if I can attach the debugger to this. I don't remember how to do that. I honestly don't have to debug in Visual Studio that often for the types of errors that I'm getting. Okay, if I actually, well, yeah, I need to do this, don't I? But the process is not running yet. I don't want to attach to a process. I just want to load the executable in it and then run it that way. And I know there's a way to do that. Okay, here we go. File open project. We need to go down to the executable. There we go. Now if we run that, boom. Unhandled exception at blah 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 blah. Out of range at memory location. That's fine. So at least we're pretty close, probably. I think the JSON is probably fine itself. Out of range at memory location. At is object. Out of range. Value at. Can I get like the actual message here? Position. Okay. die. Arrange a position. Position is a key, is it not? Point float position. So tree has a position. And a health. So we position in health. So what's its beef then? Trees, our map, string is the key. Typed T is what we're trying to get. It has a point float. I don't think that should matter unless this thing is completely sharing violation. Yeah, because this process never closed. Here. Try again. Yeah, same thing. So I need to find out why that is out of range. Unable to read memory. Unable to read memory. Bool unsigned. Okay. Position. X, Y. Can't read position. I don't remember how to view like my own crap in here. We're in JSON here, CVP. So let's try that. So we get to trees. Step into, that's going to take us to some really freaking strange places. Oh boy, I'm in over my head here. Okay, well, this has been a colossal mistake, I think. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to stop here. And once I figure out what I'm doing, I will continue on with this effort. It has to be something simple. It's just something that I'm completely overlooking, as is usually the case. So if you made it here to this point in the video, I'm completely sorry. But hopefully we'll have a lot more progress on this moving forward. So